Hey guys, this is Hell Hades. This is a Raid Shadow Legends video. Guys, I've been getting a load of requests for support on Faction Wars. Completing Faction Wars, getting yourself a Lydia is one of the best things you can do for your account, actually. Lydia comes in all over the place and starts to destroy the game. Really helps you move from that kind of mid to late game to absolute end game type of area in all sorts of ways. Doom Tower, Arena, pushing on for some cool clan boss teams, pushing on for Hydra. There's a whole load of stuff where she comes in and she just like slays it down. And even if you don't get yourself to Lydia, the goodies along the way in Faction Wars can really help you achieve fragment events, fusions, all of that type of stuff. So it's really worth spending your time to get it done. This video, we're going to go through some of the kind of team comps that I would suggest to run and some of the best champions in each faction to get you to that Lydia. Let's go. So for anyone who doesn't know, hellhades.com, we've got a lot of information on this type of stuff. You can hover over Raid Shadow Legends, go into the Faction War tier list. I'll just zoom in a touch so you can see it better. And then basically you can pick a faction. So you could be like Bannerlords, bam, who do I want to max out in my Bannerlords team? Gives you like a little key up here in terms of are they good versus are they insane? And then basically we scale it by different areas of a team that you will need. So I'm looking for an AoE decreased defense champion. I'm looking for someone who can do control to the enemy waves. I'm looking for turn meter control for bosses. I'm looking for protection and support for my team. If there are them, I'm looking for revivers in case people go down. You have to have a full team alive to get 3 stars. And then lastly, we want damage. So everybody in the faction is actually ranked in all of these different areas. If there's a little dash, they just straight up don't do anything that helps you in that area. And basically the way it ranks here is it kind of adds all of the different abilities together and then gives them a score out of 5. And basically anyone who's nearest the top has got the highest overall Faction War score. Now, it doesn't mean, though, that you just take the top 5 because you need a variation of team. You need team synergy to get this stuff done. So although the top 5 here might be the 5 that do most stuff in Faction Wars, it doesn't mean that's going to be your best 5 to get the job done. And that's what this video hopefully will tell you. Okay, then let's start with the Bannerlords and let's call out some of the champions here that are going to help you get over the line. Perhaps some that you don't hear about in a lot of these type of videos or a lot of videos about the game. So Stag Knight you will have heard about. AoE drop defense and attack. Drop defense, you do damage quicker. Drop attack, they do less damage to you. Makes a lot of sense. And then a decreased speed for bosses makes him like probably the most valuable epic in this team. Oathbound is one of these champions that doesn't really get a lot of airtime, but damn, I go to this guy as my get out of jail free card. You can play him as a level 50 quite comfortably. He just needs accuracy, a bit of speed. He can play in a stun set or a different kind of control set, and he'll do a lot of work. So he's got a freeze on his A1. He's got an AoE drop attack on his A2 with a bit of turn meter control. And then he's got block active skills, which basically forces the enemy to just hit with their A1s. It's a random hitter, which is a little bit annoying, but it's a 100% chance to land it if decreased attack is already out there. And as I say, I normally would run him in a control set just to add even more layers of potential control. Because he is a defense-based champion, he's quite easy to keep alive. So you just build him quite tanky. And as I say, I've run him at level 50 a ton of times. As long as you've got accuracy and speed and a bit of defensive stats, he becomes an absolute beast. Archmage Helmet is a good one as well. He comes from Doom Tower, the first one that you will get. He brings AoE control, plenty of buffs for your team. And he's got some kind of cool turn meter stuff going on generally across his kit as well. So yeah, he is fast and ready to go. In terms of other ones in this faction, it starts to thin out a bit. You do have Discard as a decent control champion. So he's got a provoke whilst putting shield on himself. He's got a decreased attack here as well. And he's got some good buffs. Bit of turn meter fill as well when provokes go off and stuff. But generally good. Like I would take control over most forms of skill, I guess, in this type of level. Couple of the voidies that are good. Asala is one of the best revivers in the game. She also brings AoE decreased attack, so you can pair her with Oathbound pretty well to get his abilities away. She's got the revive here with some good buffs as well, and she's got a little bit of turn meter control. Her aura doesn't count, but it doesn't really matter. The rest of her kit is good enough. And again, could be one that you run at level 50 and kind of does the job. The only kind of replacement for Stag Knight, if you don't have him, is Dagger as a void rare. So there's not a lot in this faction around AoE drop defense, and she's got a reasonable chance to land it. So if you're struggling for a drop defense champion, she can actually come in and help you out. But yeah, it's one of these factions where there's just not a lot in that category. Now, there's not much in the way of healers in this category. Chancellor Yasmin's got an okay heal on her A2. It's on a 2-turn cooldown if it's booked. And again, like someone like this, I wouldn't run any more than level 50. I probably wouldn't book, so you're probably looking at it as a 3-turner. And she's also got an AoE chance to sleep here. It's actually not bad. So she can remove buffs from enemies and then put them for a little nap. Again, make sure you've got accuracy to make that work. She does bring speed in all battles as well, which is good. And she's got good base stats. So as a level 50 champ, she's not bad. Generally, if I'm running level 50s, I'm either running them in stuff like perception gear to get my accuracy up, or I'm running stuff like regen sets that I'm getting my health topped up when I have a turn. Seneschal does bring a leech as well and a heal. So Seneschal's not bad, also provokes. It's actually pretty good for faction wars, in fairness. In terms of upgrades, there's plenty of them in this faction. Champfoot, decent. Sigmund's actually top tier in terms of bringing a lot of control and support for your team. He's one of the best in this faction. Killian's got a lot of control as well. So he's got stunnage, he's got block active skills, and he's got speed control. So Killian the Lucky is actually not bad. Cethalia's got good control over enemy buffs and stuff. Like, this faction is pretty well stacked out with good legendaries for faction wars. Ludun, good healer. Minaya, good healer for faction wars as well. Helior, good overall damage. So yeah, they've got plenty here. Raglin, amazing. Reviver, one of the best in the game. And Septimus, pure brute damage. So you do have a lot of legendaries here, but the epics definitely can get the job done in Bannerlords. Let's move on to the High Elves. So way less champions to look at in High Elves. We've got our AoE drop defense champion in a Tyrell. And he's awesome at it, honestly, because he also brings a chance to sleep. He brings a stun and turn me to drop and a decrease attack single target. He's actually really good. And he brings you defensive base damage, which means he's quite good as a tank as well. You've got Royal Guardus Nukage. You've got decreased speed from him as well, and a bit of turn me to drop for bosses. So these two are probably best in class in terms of this faction. But in terms of the other ones you've got here, I mean, the quality drops straight off. Okay, after those two, the epic quality drops off. The Nassol's actually got he's got a buff kind of removal service on the A3. And this shows how old this champion is, really. Like, you look at new champions that come out, they do this and a ton more on a lower cooldown. This ability is okay, but it's just weak compared to epics nowadays. This is not bad, though. A div heal, increased defense, is kind of like an okay support unit with a chance to sleep here. But yeah, I mean, it's just a little bit weak source compared to a lot of others. Burgess is a decent enough kind of support unit. Will give you some shieldage, give you some support. He's generally known as the solo king, but can do okay in faction wars. I wouldn't really bother with too many more of these until we get to Andrisia here, who actually, as a void epic, is really strong. So decreased crit damage, whatever. Attacking enemy in a stun, so you're kind of like single target taking someone out of the fight, which is useful. And she's got a really cool A3 here. So AoE, 100% if booked, chance of decreasing duration of all enemy buffs by 2, and increases your buffs. That's really strong. And then a good passive as well to protect somebody in your team. Don't forget, you need all 5 people over the line to get your 3 stars. This type of buff ability here is actually massive if you're trying to keep a whole team alive. So Andrisia brings some good skills. Let's jump down to the rares for a second, because those epics aren't getting you a 5-man squad over the line. No way. Apothecary, relatively easy to get through. Shards, eventually you'll pick one up. Speed, healing, is well known in the game and definitely worthy of a slot. Reliquary Tender as a void rare as well. Revives an ally, so again, getting you that kind of ability to get back to everyone getting over the line is helpful. A full cleanse and heals, really good against some of the bosses on a 3-turn, and a small decrease attack. She is actually well worth running at 50. You don't need a 60. Running at 50 and getting the job done for faction wars. A couple of others are okay here. Eris is actually not bad in terms of cleansing off some nasty stuff with her A2 and giving you kind of a speed increase. So she's pretty solid as well. But you probably do need a bit of legendary love from this faction. So people like Deliana that's just come out, actually top tier, gives you a healing, gives you the ability to block buffs on enemies. That is actually massive in Faction Wars. So Deliana, great. Arbiter, when you get her, is also really good. Full team revive, turn meter boosting. She pretty much carries you to level 21 once she's in your team. You might have Alexander as another AoE drop defense champion if you've been playing for a while, but there's a few more here. So Huntsman does it as well. We've already spoken about Tyrell. Shiramani, AoE control and healing, really good. Could be run at 50. Lysandra, insane turn meter control, really good. And then Yannicka, you can pick up fragments for, just straight out damage nuke. Tatora, if you've been around for a while, is insanely good, like insane carry. So you've got block buffs, which is great for the bosses and defense up. You've got an AoE smack whilst putting everybody under a veil and hiding them and shielding himself. And then when he's taking damage, chance to freeze as well. So plenty of options in the high elves, but the epics are probably one of the weakest set of epics in the game, I'd say. So let's move on to the Sacred Order. Tons of champions in this faction, but also tons of absolute trash. Honestly, the top row should be pretty damn ashamed of themselves here. So Canoness, I wouldn't really bother. Adria wouldn't bother. Hope is okay. She's going to bring you some buff reduction and some shieldage, and she's going to try and remove enemy buffs. Like, it's okay. Yeah, 3 turn, it's not bad. But honestly, I wouldn't over-invest in a Hope. Maybe a level 50 if you're struggling to get champions for this faction. Wouldn't bother with Frostbringer. Talia, is a high damage dealer. So if you need damage, she can come in and nuke for you. Wouldn't bother with Juliana. Absolute, terrible champion. Okay, Sanguina's the first one who really steps out and says, I can play. So she can do a full debuff cleanse from all allies except her, and she will transfer debuffs from her to a target. It's really cool. She's got block buffs as well, or block debuff, sorry, and a heal. So yeah, she has got a lot going on for Faction Wars. Really, really strong. Aethar's got some good poison damage for bosses if you need that. Thing is, everyone can get a Relic Keeper, and he can one-shot a lot of enemies, single target. But he's so one-dimensional, I just don't think he offers enough for a team to really go to the point. You'd have to 60 him, masteries for him, give him good gear, and at that point you're thinking, why didn't I just give it to Phoenix? So yeah, for me, Relic Keeper, I wouldn't bother with. None of these guys. No. Mordecai, we get some turn meter control and some burns. Good champion. We start to get to the business end here. So Deacon, he's your drop defense champion. He's your turn meter. He's your leech to give you healing. He's got speed in all battles. He's like top tier legendary champion. He does so much in Faction Wars. It's bonkers. Put him in a stun set and he's doing even more. He's doing control as well. But yeah, Deet is top tier. Phoenix is also top tier. Damn, people underestimate how good this guy is. AoE block buffs and block active skills is so good for Faction Wars. It's like you're just basically taking out those nasty waves. Drop speed and defense for a boss is awesome. And then his A1, literally the hardest smacking A1 in the game. He does a ton of work. So yeah, Phoenix is really good. Looking through these, Mistress is actually not bad for Faction Wars. You've got some heals going on here. You've got Veils going on. She's not good either, but she's not bad for Faction Wars. You start to get to a couple of the really good ones. Lodric, pretty solid. You've got ally protection for somebody and a cleanse. You've got shield for the whole team on a 2-turn cooldown if you book it. And a drop attack is not bad for a boss. Cardinal, full team revive. It's brilliant. Lightsworn, full team kind of revive on death. It's not ideal, but it's not bad. Does a decent amount of damage, brings you a decreased attack and speed on a single target, and some turn meter drop against bosses. Lightsworn against bosses for Faction Wars is actually really good. Shamal is decent for taking out tanks, and Godseeker is a brilliant reviver and healer. So you've kind of got 1-2 great revivers in this faction. Deet is your kind of drop defense, and then you've got a good amount of damage in a Phoenix. Any of the revivers really can run at 50. It's pretty much my rule is if it's a reviver or a straight support champion for Faction Wars, I can run them at 50. If it's my damage dealer I need to run them at 60. That's my rule. Coming down into the rares here, there's not too much help. Templar is pretty good for some control. So he can do some nice provokes while keeping himself alive as a bit of a filler. Again, could run at 50 to do that. Aether was okay as some damage if you've already built one out, just because you've built one out for, you know, general content. Other than that, it gets a bit weaker after that. Legendaries pretty much is one of the best factions for legendaries. There's not really a weak person in here besides perhaps Errol. But if you're looking for the better ones, you know, Cupidus now is top tier. Venus is great. Constantine, massive damage. Support and damage in Sir Nick. Archbishop, great support unit. Martyr, great support unit with a lot of damage. Damage, support. You got loads in the legendaries to kind of upgrade the teams, but you do kind of need a good foundation in epics for this one. Let's move on to the barbs. Let's talk through the epics first. I've got to say, there's a lot of epics in here, not that many, which I would recommend to go full build on. Okay, so High Cocoon, you get her as your kind of level day 30 login. She gives you speed. She brings turn meter control. She's got a decreased speed on her A1. Great for boss fights. Pretty good for waves as well. So High Cocoon is like straightforward in the mix. I loathe to say it, but Woad Painted becomes one of my favorite epics now for this faction, for Faction Wars, mainly because of her A2. So full cleanse from herself and 1 debuff from allies, then a massive heal. On a 4 turn, she gives you a massive heal to keep you topped up really well. She's got a block active skills, which is actually pretty good for Faction Wars to just lock out one enemy, and block active skills on her A1 as well. So for Faction Wars, she kind of becomes really strong, really good for this faction. Outside of those, now probably people are like, why are you not calling out Armenia? Oh, I'm like struggling with this champion. I've got her on my free to play, and she has been pretty weak. Not weak. She's been a bit flimsy. Okay, she does a good decreased defense ability. Yeah, it's on a 3 turn if you book it. She does eat quite a lot of books though to get that done. But yeah, on a 3 turn, you can get a decreased defense. We like it. Okay, don't forget in this faction, you've already got a War Maiden that does that anyway on a 3 turn, and you can book her for nothing. Okay, so it's not like it's a massive upgrade to get that ability. So you kind of want the value from her other abilities. This on paper reads great. Decreases turn meter of all enemies by 20%. If you book her, 100% chance of placing a stun for anyone that you turn meter deplete. I just never see a stun from this ability. Like, it just never seems to happen. Like, once in a blue moon, we get a stun. And if you get stuns, then the rest of her kit starts to become way better. But for me, she's not as strong as I thought she was going to be. In fact, yeah, I think she's overrated generally by the community, including me, before I had her. So Amina actually drops down in my rankings. And I would probably, on the face of it, probably take a War Maiden over her now. Harakin is really strong here. Gives you ally attack and gives you, you know, abilities like decreased defense, single target, nice buffs, a burn with poisons as well. So he's a really strong damage dealer, and he also enables the rest of your team to just get more hits in. Very good boss killer as well. You've got a really good support unit in a Sky Touched. Gives you healing basically every turn. Gives you a good cleanse and a revive on death. So that is a really helpful champion to have. Outside of that, I mean, you've got this kind of mishmash of epics that do okay jobs. Yeah, they do an okay job. You've got some damage dealers in all of these kind of like sisters or cousins or whatever they are. Alika is the best one by far, because she does actually do a lot of damage on her A2. Does a lot of damage on her A3 as well. And she's got a chance to lock out an enemy's skill, or pushes back an enemy's skill by a turn. That's really big. So against something like a Valk wave or waves of annoying enemies like man-eaters, she can push back those abilities a turn, give you enough time to get your damage done, and hopefully take out the annoying champions. So Alika is the best of the sisters, but they do all love to read. Look at this. She's like that in the library. What's next? Yeah. Hold on. I'm not coming out yet. I'm still like, she's like that. Let me just see what that skill was. Yes. Thickest books in the world. Like, she reads a ton. So, and they're all the same. So just beware of books on those champions. There's not much here in control. Ator can do a bit of control if you're struggling, a bit of provokage. But honestly, he's a bit weak source. So kind of look down and you're like, well, what about in the rares? Have we got anything that could come into the rares to help us out? Soul Bond is really strong. She actually has got an AoE A1. So in a stun set, she can help you out. She's also doing good turn meter control and damage. So Soul Bond's actually one of the better like low cost units in this faction. Definitely one that's worth kind of playing around with. Marked is not bad as well. So she gives you a block debuff, which is good against bosses, increased defense. And then she's got an AoE hit, so she could go in a control set. And she's got a weak source drop defense as well. So she's not terrible. If we get into the legendaries then, luckily, we actually get some of these legendaries going on. So Seal we get for free eventually. And Seal hard carries faction wars for this faction. Yeah, she's got AoE stun, she's got a revive, she's got decreased turn meter and stuff. So she just hard carries the faction once you pick her up. Outside of that, you've got Kantra top tier, Elder Skald top tier for damage, Valk top tier for defensive stuff. Surga really good in terms of keeping your team alive. Your Cole you can actually pick up from the clan shop after a while. High damage, good control. Kahanarak top tier. So good legendaries in this faction, which kind of are needed really because there's not that great in terms of epics. Okay, let's get into the Ogryn Tribes. Ooh, who do we pick out here? Udo straight away. AoE block buffs, AoE decreased defense. Top tier. Like, absolutely top tier for faction wars. You've got champions like Shatterbones. AoE drop turn meter and an AoE decreased speed and fill your turn meter. So in terms of slowing down the enemy, giving you plenty of time to get your moves away, Shatterbones is actually pretty damn solid. Also got an increased attack buff for your teams, kind of okay. But yeah, Shatterbones is actually really good for faction wars. Got champions like Grush, one of the login champions. He's awesome. Grush is really, really good. Defensive unit, so he's hard to kill. He's got AoE decreased attack. It's a 50-50, but decreased attack is the better of the two. And then he's got a lot of healing and puts continuous heals out and another AoE. So again, in a control set with two AoEs, makes him really, really useful in your team. Also brings Leech. So Leech will give you more healing from anyone that he attacks. Gives your team a bit more survivability. But yeah, Grush is actually really strong. Maneater, not just a clan boss champion, guys. Maneater is probably the best epic in this faction for faction wars. AoE decrease attack when he hits one person. Full turn meter steal. Yeah, full turn meter deplete of an enemy against bosses. This is absolute top draw. Fills this champion's turn meter to the amount that the target loses. Basically gets like a double turn if you take someone out that's got a high turn meter. Do need accuracy for this. And then it gives you the unkillable buff and the block debuff buff. So these two together, pretty much in any content, is top tier. The Maneater is probably the first on the team sheet, honestly. So good. Uragrim, top damage dealer, healer, all sorts of cleansing going on. Top tier champion as well. So they're probably the main ones that I call out. You've got Siege Hulk as a drop defense champion who hits hard, but kind of squishy. So you have to build him in a way to keep him alive. Udo's definitely the better of the options, but he's not bad to come in as your damage. Galka is a straight damage dealer and does a lot of damage if 60 and built well. Prundar is your kind of tank. Got provoke, strengthen, heals. Yeah, so this faction has actually got a really good variety in epics to be able to kind of get through faction wars and get the job done. If you look down into the rares, you've also got a Bellower here as an awesome rare in a control set, will do a lot of work. Jailer is a really hard-hitting single target hitter, one of the hardest in the game, certainly for rares. And you've got a really good reviver here in Gear Grinder, so can be level 50 again. Brings a revive one ally with turn meter. Also brings some healing as well. Doesn't do any damage, so you don't need to build him for damage. Just run him at 50 with some tanky stats and a decent amount of speed, and he'll do a job for you. Legendaries, there's actually really few legendaries here, but they are, they're going to be upgrades in terms of damage. Damage, damage. You've got massive control in Gergo. Gergo is like AoE freeze and gets it back pretty damn quick. So pretty solid. And I guess turn meter control and stuff in Shamrock's not bad as well. Gerptuk is a good support unit as well. Like all of the legendaries here are kind of okay. There's not that many like standout ones. High damage Iggy, high damage Biggin, and lots of control. Biggin's probably like the standout here alongside Gergo, I'd say. All right, let's talk lizards. So lizards, in terms of the epics here, I mean, you actually have a secret room for lizard epics, so you do want to invest in some, but damn, it's a little bit slim pickings. You've got an awesome champion in Venomage, gives you heal, gives you damage reduction, gives you AoE poison, gives you a single target drop defense and attack. Really, really strong epic. High damage in Basilisk here. He's also got a weird thing in his A2 that he can place a stun on a weak hit. I think it's just bad coding, honestly, but he can. And he also self-revives, so he's got a chance to kind of keep himself alive better than others. Aox is top tier as well. Healing, AoE decrease attack, and a chance to kind of increase duration of debuffs on enemies, plus a bit of poison for bosses. So those three are all pretty damn solid. In terms of the rest, you've got Broadmoor that you can fuse as a good reviver. It also gives you a bit of a turn meter boost. You've got Scathix is actually really solid, so can steal buffs off enemies and can do a full kind of cleanse and put block debuffs on your team, plus a big shield. The Scathix is good. Cardin's actually pretty damn good as well. So he gives you a heal and a shield, gives you Veil and either increase attack or increase defense depending on the type of champion, basically. So good kind of support unit, can be run as a 50. So can Broadmoor pretty damn easily. Looking sort of downwards, so it's not that much there in terms of, you know, where's your drop defense champion, where's your kind of main areas of the team. There's not much, right? So you're kind of like, well, maybe they put them in the rares. No, the rares really are pretty bad. There's not that much here. Just having a look on my kind of, yeah, the only one that is even rated remotely highly on hellhades.com is Haruspex, and that's because he's got a revive, really. So he brings you a revive and a turn meter fill, gives you a weak source, increased speed and turn meter, and he's got a little poison. So he is a bit of a filler, could be a level 50 with good stats and kind of keep your team going, but you're kind of looking upwards in this faction. So, you know, fusing Razin will definitely help you with an AoE turn meter drop and a single target drop defense and weaken. But yeah, you really are hoping to find a Draco to give you that, or a Fushan to kind of give you a lot more work in terms of this faction. All of the legendaries here, by the way, are like pretty much top tier. You know, maybe with the exception of Verdum-Kar, who's still not bad. Vardal is okay. If you got Vardal, you pair him with a Skull Swan, and he just kind of like between them, they just absolutely annihilate any bosses. But yeah, you are struggling really unless you get some of the better legendaries in this faction to take it all the way. But certainly I think Aox, Venomage, Broadmoor, Basilisk, with maybe a Haruspex could probably carry level 21 without legendaries. Let's move on to the Skinwalkers. Just got myself a Ragash, who is actually damn awesome for this faction. But let's talk epics first. Wow. If we thought the Lizards had like a bad selection of epics, this faction is struggling quite a lot. So I don't rate many of these epics at all. Standout for me is Basher, because he locks out all of your enemy waves abilities. Yeah, he locks them out for 2 turns. Should be enough time to get a load more work done. And then after that, he's also got a block buffs ability, so he kind of blocks the main abilities even landing. The Basher is top tier. Bane is your boss damage dealer or wave damage dealer, but it's all single target stuff, so better for bosses. And it's also got pretty much has got everything you want in a kit apart from AoE damage. So she is kind of squishy here. Low defense, low HP. Do need people to keep her alive. You need to keep her out of trouble. But she is strong. Afores is your reviver here. Revives 2 allies. Gives them some turn meter and strengthen. And gives you some buffs as well. Again, can be run at 50 pretty easily. Steel Skull, big healer. Gives you increased defense. So someone who's going to help you stay alive. You've got some champions like Ursine, Ironhide, AoE drop attack, that will help you from dying, basically. So that's not a bad one. And some turn meter stuff going on as well. So he's not bad for Faction Wars. Outside of those, I mean, Scabbers has got a good amount of poison for bosses. AoE leech to help you stay alive. I guess he's pretty damn solid. Taurus can do a lot of damage with his poisons, but he becomes a bit of a liability because he puts himself on 0 health. So once you've killed wave 1, he stays alive. He's like, that fine. Get into wave 2, unless you've got someone running a big shield set, he is probably going to be in trouble. So, you know, he's good for bosses, but you do kind of need a way to get him back to full health, but in between those A3s. If we're looking down, though, so this faction does have some good rares. Greybeard, AoE freeze. Fleshmonger, AoE drop defense on a decent kind of ability. There's not much of that going on up here, so he comes in as a pretty good unit for this faction. Nullhorn, AoE, absolutely insane control against all enemies. Nullhorn is brilliant except against bosses. Okay, so getting onto the legendaries then. I mean, the legendaries here are strong. Yeah, you've got block buffs in a Norog and a lot of damage. You've got ally attack in a Longbeard. Loads of support from a Hakorn. Brachus, high damage. Cleopteryx, massive damage. Drop defense and massive damage from Ragash. Control and drop defense from Coronor. Loads of damage from Tunisia. And loads of damage from a Leo. So the legendaries here are really strong. The epics are kind of weakish. And the rares are not bad for rares. Let's move on to the orcs. Orcs have got a good selection of epics. So you've got a AoE decreased defense in Zargala. Another one in Duke, which also brings you decreased attack. So Duke is probably the better of the two. It's easier to keep alive. But they're both good. You've got Seer in here. So Seer combined with buffs equals dead enemies. So she is basically top tier for damage. And then you start to get a bit of a watered down kind of team after that. So Brask is a good healer. You've got Sandlash Survivor is a good support unit who can increase the value of your buffs. You've got a bit of turn meter control going on from Tuhak and a lot of AoE damage. So he does AoE turn meter control plus damage. He's got stuns going on. So for Faction Wars, Tuhak's actually really good. If you're struggling for turn meter control, Bloodfeather can come in and do a drop speed and turn meter drop on a boss. Pretty much a boss ability with a decreased defense as well. Not that great for waves, but pretty damn good and effective on a boss kill. You've got your initial champion that you've got, Shaman, as a reviver, who's okay, but I'd much rather have Jorg. So I would never take Shaman past level 50 ever. And I'd be hoping to see that Old Hermit Jorg popped up instead so that I could get this way better revive skill. 2 allies, turn me to fill, and a veil with some decent buffs going on the rest of his kit as well. So Jorg is actually top tier support unit. Shaman, like, not really. Okay, not really of the same category. In terms of the rares here, you've got Gaelic for some damage. You've got Ironclad for some weird damage if you get a lot of healing going on, but there's not really a big direct heal going on in this faction. So I think you'll struggle to activate his main ability. And throwing him in stuff like Lifesteal Set just doesn't have the same effect. So he's actually not that great for Faction Wars here unless you get a big direct heal. Out of the rest of these, Veteran's actually not bad. Most of the rest are kind of average at best. If we get into the legendaries then, Kreela pairs really well with a Seer and is just a great champion anyway. You've got great turn meter control from a Grohack, actually really good for Faction Wars, despite him being fairly useless everywhere else. You've got Robar, AoE drop defense, high damage. Gromlock is a Doomtower champion, but drop defense and weaken, high damage. Pingarog, straight damage, but pretty good. Iron Brado, good defensive unit with some control and high damage. Warlord is just kind of top tier because he gives you shields, healing, blocks out enemies, does it all. Warlord is like insane. Yeah, and then, I mean, most of the legendaries here are not terrible, really. Even Danag's not bad. Angar's pretty good for control, but that's probably the main ones. Okay, 6 factions to go. Demonspawn next. Let's talk about some epics. I tell you what, I didn't expect to be saying this, but one of the best epics for this faction Stim Foster Consumed. Like, this guy has got really good boss mechanics. Decreased speed and some turn meter stuff on his A1. Big turn meter steal on his A3. And AoE decreased attack on his A2. With a pretty cool passive as well. He's actually like pretty top tier for Faction Wars. He's really strong. Another champion in this faction, top tier for Faction Wars, is Umbral. So AoE block buffs. Sorry, Valks. No counterattacks for you. AoE provoke. I'm just going to take all the damage and let the rest of my team do their job. Yeah, so Umbral's actually really, really strong here. I used her in my main team like right through until recently. So she's been doing work. You've got a lot of control and healing in Achak. So he's got an AoE freeze ability here. Plus he's got some nice buffs. Achak could be run at 50 pretty damn easily. Lore is great for bosses, but good for waves anyway. Turn meter control is always good from her A1. And she's got an AoE sleep. You've got champions like Azana, Eriness, Infernal Baroness. They're all kind of similar, really. They've got AoE abilities. They're all okay. You know, with things like AoE drop attack on Azana and Infernal Baroness, not bad. They're only really useful if you're running them in a stun set as well, so they bring you something else. Otherwise, they're not really bringing enough to kind of warrant them going in a team. But if you're struggling for control, then they can come in and at least give you some of that. Tanix is a free champion, gives you some good healing and a drop speed. Not bad for Faction Wars. You've got an AoE decreased defense champion in Gorlos, who's going to be kind of one of the first on the team sheet if you've got him. Gives you a burn as well for some damage and some turn meter stuff going on as well. Pretty damn solid. Tarshon is good as well. AoE weaken and some turn meter fill plus defensive buffs. Strength and buff as well if people are losing health. So there's some pretty solid champions here in this faction for epics. This is definitely one of those factions you could run all epic teams, no problem. Massive damage from Magnar with his A2. You've got Akoff as an AoE burner who does a decent amount of damage. That's a Doom Tower champion. You've got Jur the Hungerer as a good reviver here. So again, getting those 3 stars is important. Double revive from this one alongside some pretty reasonable buffs. So Jur is good. Can be run at 50 really easily. Some quite good rares here as well, actually. So Diabolist is all about turn meter control, easily farmed from campaign level 12. I've seen people run 4 Diabolists and an Allure, and the enemy literally never takes a turn. So it's a bit cheese, but it's kind of funny. Hellfang and Houndspawn together are solid. Believe it or not, Hellfang will do a freeze when they're together. Houndspawn will absolutely nuke when they're together. But you do really need the Houndspawn to be a 60 if you're going to go that route. They also do well in secret rooms, by the way, so it's not like you would only use them for Faction Wars. Marquez is a high damage dealer defense unit, so alongside someone like a Tarshon becomes pretty good. Bellhound is really good here as well. AoE damage, decreased speed, run him in a stun set and he'll do a lot of work. So the rares here are actually really good. Legendaries are the best legendaries pretty much in the game. Probably the best faction in the game for legendaries. A lot of you might have Helicaf now, giving you block damage. Block damage in Faction Wars is like mental. Duchess, crazy reviver. Huge damage from Candy. Huge damage from Crew Traxa. Huge damage from Countess Lix. Hefrak. Like there's loads of options here. Pretty much any legendary you've got here will get into your team. Like, no doubt. Massive support champion in Withir. Kaimar's a massive support champion, but actually doesn't help you as much as you think that he should for Faction Wars. He is good, but he's not like crazy like he is in other areas of the game. But yeah, the legendaries here do carry if you've got them. Right, let's talk about Undeads then. Undeads are struggling for decreased defense. Okay, if you look through their faction list, they're struggling hard, which means that runs tend to be longer. And you need to find other ways to get the job done. I think the only drop defense champion here is a legendary. Who is it? Who even does it? Does anyone do it? Let me consult with hellhades.com as a quicker way. Decreased defense. Vlad's. Suzerain. I think Suzerain is the one. I always forget about him. Suzerain. Yes. Attacks all enemies. 50% chance of placing weaken. Places drop defense if they do not place a weaken. So there you go. He's your best chance at a drop defense in the faction, which is slim pickings, right? It's really difficult to get that ability away. And when you get into harder waves, you kind of need that ability to get fights done fast. So you start to struggle. Let's go through what we got. We've got an epic here in Gordrab, Reviver, good support unit. If you've got yourself a high tank Gordrab, you should get really far through faction wars without really needing a lot else. He will just keep reviving, keep your team going, and he's really solid. You've got AoE hits coming in from Dark Aethel, free champion. Hits for an okay amount, but does do things like decreased speed, which is pretty useful in faction wars. Still kind of average, but you know, for a damage dealer that gives you a decreased speed, it's actually not terrible. Dark Elhain, high damage dealer. Husk, high damage dealer with an AoE stun. Really good champion. We'll look through the rest of them here. Good support unit in Morsian Mage will keep your team alive, keep your team moving, give you block debuffs for boss fights. Really useful there. Bogoth, one of the best tanks in the game, supports your team, gives you healing as well. So as he's taking hits, you're healing, and as he's taking hits, the enemy are getting a leech on them. He also gives a provoke as well, so he's just kind of protecting your damage. So yeah, Bogoth is actually really good. Zelatar's an old school support unit, but does have a good AoE sleep and some nice shields and heals. So this team is kind of like packed with champions that just kind of keep your team alive, struggle with taking down the enemy. Anax is a high damage dealer, single target, and I've spoken about some of the other damage dealers already. We look at rares here. We've got a good AoE Banshee, so it does all AoE attacks. Put her in a stun set again, you get yourself a good amount of control going on. Grinner is a good reviver here for this faction. If you don't have Gordrab, then Grinner can kind of come in and get some revives done with his A3. Revives one champion, but it's on a 4-turn. Does bring an AoE hit as well and an increased attack, so it's not bad. Doomscreech is a good rare here for turn meter control and a defensive buff. Seducer's actually a really good rare here. Gives you block debuffs and increased defense. So against bosses, sometimes Seducer's the one that comes in and actually gets the last boss dead. Yeah, this block debuffs against the last boss can be clutch. Also brings an AoE drop attack and pairs up if you've got Temptress, but Temptress is not that good. The legendaries here do start carrying, so Mashal, top tier damage, and Leech. You've got champions like Rotos, absolute crazy nukes, taking down enemies. Champions like Bloodgorged, blocking out the enemy waves and doing high damage. Euros could probably just solo the whole thing. He's nuts from Doom Tower. Necrit, keeping your team alive. So again, like in terms of legendaries, there's plenty here, but it's definitely a difficult faction to get kind of fast runs going. Lots of support, but not that much damage output compared to some of the other factions. Right, let's talk about Dark Elves then. There's a couple of really great champions in this mix. You've got Spider, AoE drop defense, also brings AoE drop attack, and AoE weaken. So he's kind of giving 3 of the biggest debuffs you need for this type of stuff. Really solid epic champion, can do a lot of work for you. Also with his drop defense, with his drop defense ability here, he places the drop defense, so he doesn't have to hit to do it. It means he doesn't have any bad affinities for this. So as long as he's booked out, it would be a 100% chance to land that going through. Badam is awesome as well. AoE drop defense and attack. They're 2 of the best in terms of like setup. Sylar's probably the best turn meter control, stroke just general control champion for this faction. She's got this massive turn meter control, decreased speed, and then she's got decreased accuracy on an AoE. So you just put her in a stun set as well with 2 AoEs and all this turn meter stuff going on. Pretty much she locks out the enemies by herself. So she's really, really solid. Crimson Helm's another good control champion. Gives you a 4-hit provoke and puts block damage on herself. Also gives you revive on death. So as long as you use this at the right time, you should be able to kind of keep your team alive. And for bosses, decreased attack as well is not bad. Defensive unit, so kind of easier to keep alive than most. Luria's got an AoE freeze, which is pretty good for control as well. And if we get into some kind of damage. Dark Kael, if you get Dark Kael, is absolutely top tier. Someone like Lure is actually really high damage as well. Helps you get through the waves really well. Probably the best two, I think, in terms of like smacking the waves down. Other champions which are good. Visionary is really good in terms of bringing you AoE decreased crit rate and crit damage. Increases your turn meter feel and gives you 2 really good buffs as well. And he has got a turn meter drop A1. So pretty damn good for Faction Wars in terms of champions. Rian, if you've got a Rian, really solid as well. Cleans off enemy buffs and puts out an AoE weaken. Caden is your kind of reviver here. So got a double person revive, an AoE decrease attack, and a provoke, albeit the provoke's kind of weak source chance. But defensive unit again, so easy to keep alive. Can be run at 50 as long as you've got him in some decent stats. We kind of take a look down at the rares here. Kael was just straight up good. Poisons, damage, AoE damage, pretty damn solid. Judge does a lot of single target damage and some good debuffs as well. Here, so each hit's got a chance to just put some good debuffs out there. And hits hard. Yeah, he's actually a good hitter. And he's got an AoE A2. You've got champions like Spirit Host, early level, decent, kind of fall off pretty hard after that. But it does bring you a block debuff if you need it for bosses. So it's not terrible. Cold Heart top tier here is a rare in terms of damage, turn meter control on bosses. And if we get into the legendaries, again, as you'd expect, the legendary port is strong. So I think I found when I first walked through Faction Wars, actually, I had a lot of damage, but I struggled to keep everybody alive. So even with the legendaries, it's the same sort of story, really. High damage, drop defense and good damage, high damage, high damage, high damage, high damage. Like, you kind of need a couple of those support units. So Blind Seer is a great support unit. Mithrala now, great support unit. Physics, great support unit and good damage. But yeah, you definitely need to bring a couple of the support units in to get you through the waves. Otherwise, you're going to struggle with this faction. Okay, let's move on to the Night Revs. Night Revs here. There's a lot of trash in these epics. Like really, Crypt Witch, Pitiless One, Necro, Asalas. Like there's a lot of shady characters with candles burning on their shoulders trying to tempt you. But that's not who you want to build. You want to build yourself a miscreated monster. Yes, AoE stun and some shield for your team. You want to bring in a Doom Priest, lots of healing and support. You want to be bringing in a Synacia, AoE hits, team heals, putting people's skills on cooldown. Yeah, these are the type of characters you need. Sepulchre is actually really good against a boss, gives you block debuffs and increased defense. But basically only single target damage. So the main boss here is that annoying one that you've got to kill within 10 turns. And she doesn't do a lot for that, but she does stop you taking a load of debuffs. Rector, a lot of people get Rector now because she's kind of like one of these link code champions. Great reviver, great healer. Should really carry you through to the last, stage 21. Rector is a great support unit. You've got AoE drop defense in Tylesia here. There's not much else going on for AoE drop defense in this faction, so she becomes really good and doesn't need books to land it, which is quite rare to find. So she's actually really good for Faction Wars. You've got a bit of control from a Berghoff, but not too much. There's actually not much in the way of control here. Stuns with Miscreated Monster, some provokes from Berghoff, but generally you're wanting to run the AoE champions like Synacia, your Skull Crowns, maybe even Miscreated Monster as well in stun sets to get you through it. You do have single target nukage from a Faceless if you need it. Single target nukage from a Whisper if you need it. Got a good turn meter to boost it in a Golden Reaper with an AoE drop attack as well, which can be pretty useful. In terms of rares, you've got a couple of champions here. So Gladiator, actually pretty damn good. He's got a decreased speed on his A1 and a decreased attack. Got like a chance to stun on his A2. And he's got an AoE on his A3, so you can kind of build him in a control set alongside these things. And he actually becomes pretty useful. Outside of him, you've got a bit of damage in an Ashwalker. You've got a cooldown reduction champion in a Renegade, which can be helpful if you're trying to do things fast. But yeah, again, we kind of get to the legendaries, and there's a lot more going on. Tomb Lord top tier, AoE drop attack and defense, and turn meter control. Yeah, loads going on, and poisons. Loads going on with this guy. Hedgie's actually pretty damn good for wave control here. Whirlim does actually good damage and some nice control as well. Calvalak's high damage. Thea max damage. Solus control and damage. So yeah, pretty much, you know, as always, like the legendaries will bring what they bring, and then you fill around it with your epics as you need it. Okay, let's move on to the Dwarves. The Dwarves used to be like a really tough faction where they just didn't really have a lot going on, but they have been filled out. So you've got champions like Fodbor giving you your AoE drop defense and a stun. Really good champion for faction wars. The epics are just brilliant, honestly. Meldra for reviving. You've got Geo as like insane damage and some control for enemies and buff steal. Loads going on here. You've got Runekeeper, who's giving you turn meter fill and increase attack and a cleanse and a heal. Like loads going on with this guy as well. Grizzlejar, one of the OGs, has got block debuffs for the boss fight. Really useful. And an AoE drop attack as well. Another one that was always good for the boss fight. Rearguard Sergeant, drop defense here. Ally protection and heals. And an AoE drop attack as well. You've got Demitha now with block damage. Yeah, really strong champion. For the boss, Rockbreaker is one of the best boss tanks in the game. So he can do, it just does damage with his A1, but he's got a chance to just take reduced damage from the boss hit, and the boss hits for crazy amounts. So this guy is one of the best tanks for this boss in the game. So yeah, definitely one of those factions where epics can just kind of carry this easily. And in terms of rares here, you've got a couple of good champions. So Master Butcher's got a provoke, got some healage going on. Chance to revive somebody, but not keep the whole team in the game. So although he's better elsewhere, he's not the best for faction wars. He's okay. You've got high damage in the Beast Wrestler. You've got high damage in Painsmith. You've got a weak source drop defense and increased accuracy for your team in Kurzad, which is not bad. Dildul, not bad as well. And you've got, who's the other one? Avir is actually pretty good in terms of giving you some turn meter stuff, some healing. He's got a chance to do decreased attack, decreased speed, and poison. So he's actually got quite a lot going on in his kit for a rare. Legendaries here, though, now are top tier. Brogni is like the absolute hard carry of this faction. Morley is good for a revive and some control. Not much damage, though. Herndig, absolutely insane. Drop defense, one-man team. Takes it all down. Really solid. Trunda, high damage. But yeah, pretty much. I mean, most of the champions here would do a solid amount of work. But yeah, Brogni's the one I would look for alongside Morley and probably Herndig as like the top three. Let's finish it off then. Shadowkin. Let's finish the video. If you're still with me, well done. Please consider dropping me a subscription. It's free. Just hit subscribe. That's all you need to do if you like this type of content. So in terms of this epic bunch in the Shadowkin, there's actually, again, they started off very weak, but they have filled out to a reasonable level now. So you've got Hatatsu, really solid here. AoE drop attack. Also got some heals and increased defense. Immune to a lot of kind of nasty debuffs. And he's got a leech so he can kind of bring some healing for your team. You've got champions like Aboru who can place decreased defense on a whole wave as long as there's already plenty more debuffs out there. So as long as there's more debuffs on that person, she's going after 4 or more, she'll do an AoE drop defense, which can become really effective. Especially if you pair her with Riho, who kind of puts loads of debuffs out there. That's a really good combo. Then she's got a lot of turn meter control going on and some poisons as well. So not to be sniffed at, especially for boss fights. You've got Taragi, who has got a lot of protection, shieldage, provokes, so got that kind of control going on, and poisons for boss fights as well. Really solid. There's not too much in the way of revivers going on here. Sashi can do a bit of reviving, so she will revive someone if she kills an enemy, and she's got reasonable damage, so Sashi can do a bit of work. Also brings a leech as well and an AoE A1. So if you build her in some sort of control set, she can do some, you know, stunnage and whatever as well. Not too bad. King Agashi's also got a revive here, one of the newer champions. It's only a single person, but not too bad on a 4-turn. Got an ally attack basically with one of your team as well as a turn meter fill. So not bad for Faction Wars as well. After that, it kind of starts to dip down a bit. You've got AoE stunnage from Buren Giri. You've got a lot of damage from a Genbo. And probably after that, I would start to think about saving your resources and not building out any more of these epics. In terms of rares, there's not really too much going on here. Vagabond's probably the standout. Chance to sleep. Block buffs on an enemy. Also with some turn meter fill going on. And then basically a turn meter fill and increase attack A3. It's not bad for Faction Wars, but it's not that great either. In terms of the legendaries then, just to finish it off. Yeah, I mean, there's great legendaries here. Lady Kimmy, top tier. Yoshi, really good support. Ninja, massive damage. Genzin, AoE drop defense. Probably the best one really the only one in the faction that does it well. Kouku, massive support champion with high damage. Karato, high damage. Riho, massive support with great buffs and debuff. Blockage. You've got Jingwon. Yumiko, one of the best champions in the game. So yeah, there's a lot going on in terms of legendaries here. And I'd say one of the weaker bunches of epics still in the game. So there you go, guys. That is my guide to Faction Wars. Hopefully it's helpful. Go and get yourself a Lydia. I'll catch you later.